Hi, I'm Hamish Black, and welcome to Writing on Games. Now, after revisiting Dark Souls for the first time in months, I've come to a revelation of sorts, that Blighttown, an area despised by many, might have become one of my favourite areas in the game. Now, don't get me wrong, I still hate playing through it. No other area fills me with the kind of genuine dread that Blighttown does. But I utterly adore what it represents. Highly valid technical issues aside, I think it represents the absolute turning point at which you are either a Dark Souls player or you're not. In fact, I would go as far as to say that if you can survive Blighttown, you are now steeled enough to make it through the entire game. Now, this thought came to me because I had played through the two bosses that arguably most players see as the real wheat from the chaff moments of the game, the Asylum Demon and the Bell Gargoyle fights, and thought about how trivial they are to me now, as someone who has internalized the rules of this game. Blighttown is something you never really get better at, however. You can become more efficient at traversing it, but what it represents is more philosophically oppressive than those previous encounters could ever be. Think about it, those previous enemies are hard, but at the end of the day, once you learn the rules of the game, they become like any other enemy, conquerable with a little patience. As the game goes on, you'll see those enemies that were originally full-blown bosses becoming regular minion-style enemies. These encounters also toy with the idea of player reward in a really interesting way. They allow you to savour in the victory no matter how short-lived that may be. You climb to the top of the Undead Asylum, and after beating the Asylum Demon, you're allowed to ascend to the cliff edge, whereupon you are taken to Firelink and to relative peace. After the Bell Gargoyle fight, you have climbed through Undead Burg and overcome the panic of an unexpected extra boss, and are then allowed to continue ascending towards your objective, your reward. As the camera pans out, you see your character towering over what they have just conquered. At almost every part of this journey, you can see where you have come from and simultaneously how far you have developed as a player. It plays into the beauty of the level design's verticality and uses this as a means to make the player feel powerful, even for a brief time. This idea of ascension and how it's linked to player reward is important, because Blighttown basically subverts all of this. It handles verticality in a way very similar to Spec Ops: The Line, for example. In that game, as your team moves further into a storm-ravaged Dubai, you find yourself constantly descending, always moving closer and closer to your character's personal hell. Verticality can be a very important but subtle symbolic device, and the harrowing descent into Blighttown's depths only serves to prove this. It's to the point that if you take the quote-unquote easy route into Blighttown, that is, using the Master Key to get to the Valley of Drakes, then this might actually be the first point in the entire game that you move noticeably downwards. The descent here is long and arduous. No longer are you being moved up towards your reward. Instead, you're moving downwards to an objective that you can't really see, and every step you take moves you further into oppressive darkness. You are forced to navigate narrow platforms in what is essentially a vertical maze, as you also deal with multiple enemies, some incredibly hard to strike, who can inflict poison on you or worse, toxic. In many ways, it feels like your character's moveset isn't built for this kind of traversal. Many of my deaths here have been from rolling too quickly onto a platform, or underestimating the momentum with which I move and falling to my death. As the mechanics prove, you are really not welcome here, and the game wants you to know it. Even if you take the prescribed route into Blighttown through the depths, you'd think that a place called the Depths would be the furthest downwards you could possibly go. As Blighttown proves, this is far from the case. Even in the depths, despite how oppressive an environment it is, there's a sense of architectural consistency to it all. Blighttown, on the other hand, feels like an area long forgotten. Rickety-ass planks of wood are all that separate you from harrowing falls, and hope is as devoid from this area as the light you find yourself constantly moving away from. There's a tangibly grimy, makeshift feel about the whole area, like it's all about to collapse at any minute. The enemies have acclimatized to this, however, and the player, by comparison, feels even more like an outsider. And after all of this, what is your reward for traversing this huge vertical maze unscathed? Well, it's a vast, almost unending expanse of poisoned sludge. It takes the way the game handles verticality and ascension to one's reward and completely turns it on its head. The space you see at the bottom is ruthlessly horizontal, spanning further than your eye can see. It's not like Lost Izalith, which just feels unfinished. It feels like the vast expanse of Blighttown is deliberate. It's just you, a whole bunch of enemies, and a sludge that not only drains your health, but slows down your movement in the process. Even if you do make it down to the bottom and rest at the bonfire before proceeding to fight Quelaag, doing so only means that you cannot homeward bone back to relative safety. You had to climb all the way back up, facing all the challenges you bested on your way down. So why is this sense of unending dread so compelling when analysed from a distance? Well, I would say that it does something that previous encounters simply cannot. It turns the world itself into your enemy. As I've said in previous videos, the world of Dark Souls is uncaring about your presence, and no other area highlights this quite like Blighttown. What, so you got through the area? What do you want, a cookie? I said before that Dark Souls is representative of life, and what better way to exemplify that but by having an area that flat out tells you, hey, sometimes you'll work really goddamn hard for something and you'll get jack shit for it. That said, more than any other part of the game up to that point, Blighttown serves as a test of your resolve, not against an enemy, but the game's world itself and the values that it represents. The game does not elevate you to a position of relative importance here. Instead, you have to choose to descend further from the light to power your way through, despite all signs pointing to the fact that you are not welcome here. You choose to overcome, not because of any sense of consequence you feel your actions may have, but simply because you need to convince yourself that you can. Any progress in Dark Souls is an act of self-betterment, even if it exists in a world that is hostile and indifferent. The way Blighttown messes with the ideas of verticality and player reward means that when you finally emerge from the overwhelming darkness and return to Firelink, you don't feel powerful or mighty having bested an enormous enemy. You feel small, you feel insignificant, but importantly, you feel like you have truly earned the sun shining on your face. The goal of Blighttown is not to teach you how to best an enemy, but to teach you to appreciate the little victories. And once you have learned that, you can arguably handle anything the game throws at you. So I hope you enjoyed that little return to Dark Souls. I know a lot of you subscribed because of my previous videos on this game, but I didn't want to go back to it unless I felt I had something resembling a unique angle on it. Essentially, we've got enough people talking about how the game is tough but fair, so I thought I'd defend an area most people seem to despise. Now, do you feel there's an area that better executes on what I've talked about here? Let me know your reasons in the comments. And with that, I'd just like to thank my patrons who are really genuinely changing my life for the better. Your names should be on the screen now. You're allowing me to pursue this in a way not previously possible, and you're also helping me vastly improve my mental health. For that, I cannot thank each and every one of you enough. Now, if you want your name in the end scroll, or access to the soundtracks and scripts for the episodes, or even early access to the episodes themselves, please consider checking out the Patreon. Even small donations help me enormously. And with that, I'm Hamish Black, and this has been Writing on Games. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.